I am so excited to welcome Pemi Aguda to the podcast today. Pemi is from Lagos, Nigeria. She has an MFA from the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. Her short stories have won numerous awards, including the O. Henry Prize. Her work has been supported by an Octavia Butler Memorial Scholarship, and her novel in progress won the 2020 Deborah Rogers Foundation Writers Award. She was a 2021 Fiction Fellow with the Miami Book Fair, a 2022 MacDowell Fellow, and is the current Hortense Spillers Assistant Editor at Transition Magazine. Ghostroots, her debut story collection, was a finalist for the 2024 National Book Awards in Fiction and the Faulkner Award. And this story that we're talking about today, Manifest, was first published in Granta and then in this esteemed collection, Ghostroots. And then you have a new novel coming out in 2026, One Leg on Earth. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to jump right in. And I would love to just start out by talking about the impetus for this story or how it first came to you.
Thanks, Kelly. And thanks again, everybody, for being here. So who knows where a story really starts from, right? But in 2018, I think, I attended the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and I went in for this craft class by Samantha Hunt, who is a writer I adore. She writes both fiction and nonfiction. And in the class, she talked about the idea of apophenia, which is kind of the mind's desire to make connections between like unrelated events. And it's not something that is great for like good mental health, but she was positing that it's great for fiction. And so she made us do this exercise where we all made a list of things that we had been thinking about recently. And then in little groups, we all kind of talked through these disparate items on the list. And by talking through the items, we or people in our group kind of found connections between them. So on this list, I don't exactly remember everything on my list, but on my list, I had resemblance, because that is something I look very much like my mother. So it's something I've been thinking about at the time. So I had resemblance on my list. I had acne on my list. I'm not sure I remember why. And then I had cruelty. And I'd been thinking about cruelty because I had read a line in a poem. And I till today, I haven't been able to find that poem again. But it was a random line in the poem that said something like, exhausting my cruelty to find myself. And so in talking about all of these things, I think my subconscious went to work. And then months later, like Manifest was born out of that. It's just kind of the meeting of all of these ideas in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. And I read another interview, or I listened to an interview with you where you said that you allow things to percolate for a long period of time.
Yes.
So this just percolated in your mind and then...
It percolated. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think that was the word you used, but that's...
No, yeah, but it's right. I kind of like to let ideas just fester.
Yeah, that was the word you...
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm always afraid that if I start too early, then I'm going to lose something or lose some kind of steam. And so I like to have my subconscious just keep working in the background. And like the concept of this podcast is so fascinating to me, but there's a way that the answer to every question is I don't know, because it's all, a lot of it is just like intuition and subconscious. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It can be hard because if you look at it too closely, it can stymie you probably when you're creating. You think about the process too much. It's like hitting a tennis ball. If you if you think about the stroke, then you can't hit the ball. But we'll try. So you chose the second person POV for this story. And I also listened, you were talking about how Laurie Moore was an influence for you. But was this the first story you've tried in second person, and why did you feel like it would work well here?
It might be my second, but the first must have been, I don't know that it's published anywhere. I'm not sure why. When I started writing the story, I didn't think that I knew why I was writing in the second person point of view. But then after I had a first draft, and I kind of understood what I was writing towards. I then saw how the second person point of view was working on two levels. The first level being just the you that can also be substituted for a she or an I. But then there are moments of like the imperative, right, where it can be read as the grandmother or some spirit, like commanding the character to do something. And then I think when I stumbled upon that, I realized like this is why the second person works for this story. I don't remember it being a conscious choice beforehand. Maybe I was just trying things out.
But that is cool because the you could be a collective or all these, manifestations in her. So the title Manifest for you, how did you come to that title?
So the title of the story used to be Cruelty. And I sent the story to a friend of mine and they said, I don't think that's your title. That's a theme of the story. But one of the sentences in the story already had the word manifest. I think it was something about perhaps all you needed was like permission, like an excuse to manifest. And then I thought that had more energy. But also I think of manifest, at the time I used the word manifest, I didn't think I was even thinking about the way it's used a lot these days. I think growing up, manifest was a word I heard a lot in church, right? Like in sense of like manifestations of signs and wonders, or just something manifesting in a person, like something supernatural manifesting in a person. And when I had this story and I had that, that's where manifest comes from, like the way. And now that it's like in the zeitgeist, it's like really interesting because I do think that I was talking to a friend the other day I asked her what she wanted for herself and like if like her ideal situation, if she could articulate it. And she said that not many, she hasn't, there's a block between like desire and articulation because sometimes you are too afraid to say what you want because you don't want the thing to happen. But then there's a way that when you articulate something, your brain maybe turns you in the direction of actually working for it and there are less excuses. So I do like the way that manifests the word also just like opens roads for you to acknowledge something that you might not have before. Whereas this, like in the sense of this character, this manifestation is making her see things about like her own life, about her own mother, about her own history that she hadn't before.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, and I was thinking about the way that a belief system, like for instance, her mother's belief system, she seems to be manifesting a reality in the story. And I want to get into that in a little bit, but I didn't want to skip over it opens with her getting her first pimple and then her mother calling her Agnes for the first time. And the pimple seemed like such a perfect manifestation. This eruption on her face takes over and she can't get it to stop. And at first I thought, okay, every time she commits another violence, they go away. But then it does start out that way, right? And then after a while, no matter what she does, they're just proliferating on her face. So can you tell us a little bit about the symbolism of the pimple? And I mean, I know it came to you from that writing prompt.
Yeah.
It was good that you used it. But like how you saw it, at first, did you think she could control it through the cruelty? And then you decided nothing's going to stop this explosion.
Yeah, exactly, more or less.
Yeah.
I love reading fiction where, I mean, this happens in real life too, where it's clear that your body knows more than your conscious mind does. I've had like psychosomatic illnesses in my life where once one thing is acknowledged or confronted, that some symptom goes away. And so that was, I think, perhaps the idea going in here. Like, what does her body know? What is her body pointing her in the direction of? And the original idea was that a pimple would be sent away after she did something horrible, But then after she has explored all the questions that she has, like, am I actually who I want to be? I guess the grandmother's presence, like, it's not, there's also something about how you can't like logic your way out of some things, right? Like, you think A is equal to B, and that, even in fiction, that doesn't satisfy me. Like, if the symbol is static, then what's the point? So once that kind of got out of hand, it felt more true to the experience that this person was having, which is like everything is kind of just exploding. Yeah.
Right. Like, she feels like she gets to the bottom of it, but then it just keeps going. Yeah.
Keeps going. Yes.
I was interested in, and I didn't put this in the question, so I apologize, but I just thought I forgot this question, and it's so crucial. When you were writing the story and she starts getting more and more violent in the story, so, then she doesn't pick her friend, or she doesn't take her friend to work, or Leslie to work, and then, and then the dog, and then the boy, as it was becoming progressively more violent, was it hard for you to keep going with that? Or was it fun to have a character? Well, I did also hear that you really like to watch murder mysteries, and so do I. So do I. So I kind of get it. It's kind of fun to explore it on the page, but were you getting nervous at all as it got wildly out of control? When she had... No? Okay. Good.
I don't think I was. I think... So I submitted the story to my workshop when I was at the University of Michigan. Until today, so many people have not forgiven me for the dog's death.
I know. I had a harder time with the dog than the boy, which is really weird.
Exactly. And that was kind of the question I put to them in class. Like, everybody brings in stories about human death all the time. Like, I understand, but also, like, think about that. Like, why this is affecting you more than a human death. But no, I did not feel stressed as violence. It's, again, there is a distance of the page, like, it's fiction, and these people are not real.
Right.
Even though the emotions beneath them are. Like, I think, like, I legit had some of these questions about, like, who am I? Am I my mother? Am I my grandmother? So those questions are real, but the people in the story are not. And so it's easier for me to go to strange and violent places because it's contained.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very freeing to see someone else do that, actually. Because I think a lot of times fiction I read feels constrained by a politeness that maybe isn't serving the story. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of religion, what actually the Pentecostal Christians are like in Lagos, and what you're feeling about the religion in the story, what role it's playing for the character in the story.
So, really, like, Christianity, I grew up in the church, in Pentecostal church, and churches in Lagos, in Nigeria, are as common as restaurants. Like, there are 2 on every street. And so there's a way that my brain doesn't even, now that I've been away from it for a while, I see things more clearly. But I think even at the time of writing the story, religion felt just as normal. It felt as part of the ecosystem and the climate in a way that I wasn't really thinking about, like, what is this doing as an element of the story. It just felt like it blended in, right? But in a country where, like, the government doesn't do much for its people, a lot of religious bodies have kind of taken the burden of helping communities, and so they have that power, right? They have that power. And therapy is not something that is common or accessible in Nigeria. So it makes sense that a lot of people go to church believing that they're going to find some kind of solace there. And I think it does help some people, right? I think it does help some people, but I never went to see my grandparents in the villages because my parents, I don't know if you know the verse in the Bible. It's like 2 Corinthians 5:17, I think. It says like, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. All things have passed away. Behold, everything has become new. That's kind of the verse.
No,
And
I
people
didn't.
take that quite seriously in like, there is hope, right? It's like, I'm a new person. I can let go of everything that has come before me. But then there's like a harsh separation from the past.
So it's true. You don't want to talk about the past. You don't want to
Yes.
talk about, okay.
Yeah. Like you don't need to know because everything is new in Christ. That's kind of the sense of things. And
if you were to ask about your grandparents, your great-grandparents, someone might say there's no need to know anything about all that because...
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, there's things that I did know, but, about going back there, there's also this idea of like village people trying to harm you. There's a way that a lot of people move to the city and then kind of have a clean cut from the lives that they had before. And they think that the move to the city is something that people back in the villages might be envious of. And so they think, do not go back there because the people who are envious of you might harm you in some way. So, in many ways, it was protective. Like, we don't want people to see you and like mark you for evil or something like that. It was protective, but it also meant that there was just no knowledge. Like, I couldn't go back there, like see the lives that my parents had lived before they moved to the city, which was sad. And I think a lot of stories in this book were trying to like write into that absence. Yeah.
Even if their own parents were in the village,
Yeah.
they couldn't go
like
back.
they came to us, we didn't go to them.
Okay, got it.
My grandmothers came to us, we didn't go to them.
So there's the element of supernatural in religion. Is that really alive and well? I mean, the mother in the story, believes that it actually could be Agnes come again. Mm-hmm. So how would that work in terms of religion? I mean, what's just like being born again, kind of, or reincarnated?
Yes, there are also these names in Nigeria, like that start with Babatunde, which literally means father has come again, or Iyatunde, like Yetunde, which is mother has come again. So if a child is born, like this is in Yoruba culture, which is I'm Yoruba, if a child is born close to the time of like a grandparent's death, they just assume that the child is some version of the person who has left. And so this is just part of the culture, and it's in Yoruba, but it's also in other cultures too, in other tribes in Nigeria. So this is not something that is out of the ordinary. It's, I did a book launch for this event in Nigeria, in Abuja, and somebody in the audience stood up and said that this had happened to her like the day before, like her mother had said that she was acting exactly like the grandfather that she had never met. So it's very much in culture. Yes.
That is fascinating. All of this starts happening when she's the age that her grandmother died. And where did you get the backstory for Agnes? Did you just think, what would be the worst thing that could happen? She killed the grandfather and she was terrible, she was an extreme character.
She wasn't yes. I don't know where all of that came from.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that is not someone you want to come back as.
No.
And then so there were a lot of reversals in terms of religion. For instance, like her mother, hits her with the Bible. She's eaten by the light. She's not, I always think of you going into the light, but she's actually eaten by the light. And in another part, she recedes into the light. And I just sense something in the story about the fact that the mother is so consumed by her belief system and her childhood trauma that she's not capable of being a good mother. I got the sense that the main character, whose real name we never get, do we? I read it like 14 times, but she's called Agnes, but okay. If anyone else caught it, I looked and looked. But yeah, so the mother, like is not on location. She's in her belief system and she is acting, and she's also in her past. So I know you were writing about intergenerational trauma and the way that manifests in a child's life. But up until that 26th year, the main character has been a good girl. Everybody loves her. And there is also something about not being a people pleaser too, probably, like realizing one day I don't want to do everything. I mean, it's an extreme example in this story, but
Yes.
one day you do realize, like, I don't want to do everything that you're asking me to do. I don't want to drive you to work. I don't want to, So was that a main theme for you as well? Like, I know you mentioned becoming your own person, but more specifically, not being a people pleaser. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. More than people pleaser, I think perhaps this is the first time this character is questioning anything, right? Like if who we are is what we do, and everything we've been doing is what other people have told us to do, then like where is the you there? Is kind of what I was thinking about. And what I love about speculative fiction is just turning the dial up on something, right? In a way that might seem ridiculous to somebody else, but once we turn the dial all the way up, then we see even just reality for what it already is, right? So like this is an extreme example, but like how much questioning has anybody done, right? In my early 20s, I started to think about this. It was the first time I had moved abroad. I was away from home, and just my consciousness. I guess that's when I really grew up. And once my vista widened, I started to see all the constructs that had been carefully built around me, and without the people who were enforcing those constructs, then I had to decide for myself like where my own lines were, and that can be a very scary or freeing question once you start to explore them. Yeah.
Yeah. And some people never do.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering about writers who've influenced you, because I was reminded a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe's, like, The Telltale Heart. I don't know, because, both stories have an obsessive person, a lot of guilt, an unreliable narrator, and then just the way it spirals out of control. I thought of him, but who influences you, particularly in speculative fiction? I'm curious.
I think Shirley Jackson is a big one for me. I love how in her stories, you're never quite sure if something supernatural is happening or if it's just psychological. I kind of like to live on that level. I think of Han Kang, who wrote The Vegetarian, which it's the novel came from the short story that was actually also published in Granta called The Fruit of My Woman, and there is a transformation that happens. So I like physical transformations too, like in fiction. I like, I think I've been influenced by Laura Vandenberg, if you know her.
I love her writing. Yeah, I
Me
love her
too.
stories. She's amazing.
She does like unsettling very, very, very well. Yes.
So I'm always curious about speculative fiction in terms of, coming to an ending and how much you want to reveal about what's actually happening. Here we don't know, if Agnes is an actually re-inhabiting her. I mean, I had more of the feeling that it was their belief that was causing the transformation, the belief that it was possible. But, you don't say, so we all get to interpret it our own way. Is that sort of a feature of all the speculative fiction that you enjoy? You just kind of said that, that you like, that it sort of stays in that unknowing. But is that a feature of all speculative fiction, you think? Can you think of any in which it's not my specialty, so I don't know a lot of speculative fiction?
Yeah. What's the question? Any speculative fiction?
Any, like, I wonder how to end a story when you're writing speculative fiction and stay in that space where several things might be happening. Like, I would have the impetus as sort of a conventional story writer to want to wrap it up or, to come to a conclusion.
It's hard, I think, to land speculative conceits. It's really hard. The way I think about it, or the way I tell my students to think about it is, if you can't resolve something, can you resolve something else? So if the intangible can't be resolved, then you might resolve like something with like objects or some other thread in the story. So that
being something tangible in the story.
It could be something tangible, or it could be some other, like if the core. So I was just reading a student story about grief, for example, and grief is like unfinished business. So it's going to remain messy, right? But there are other lines of tension in that story. There are some objects, but there are other lines. There's a father and a child. There's a father and a sister-in-law. Like if they were to resolve one of those other lines, then we could still handle the grief being messy. And I think, yes, there's something about her maybe trying to like exhaust this last time with killing this person and the pimples just like taking over, where it almost feels like it kind of, there is some surrender there. So we don't know what happens next, but something.
We know it's taken over. She's allowed it to take over. In terms of writing a story, so you have all this symbolism, you have the pimples, you have the mirrors, you have the weevils, and you have the weevils like being separated, the lepers versus the other. When you are crafting a story, and it may be different every time, did you have any sense of how many, like for instance, you used the word mother or mom 47 times in the story. I always like to figure out how many times someone has used certain words, because I'll think that something is the main theme of the story I'm reading. And then I'll realize, oh, wait, I missed that mother's mentioned far more than mirror, far more than pimple. I forget how many times pimple is mentioned. And I thought that was the main one. But so when you are crafting a story, are you thinking about the symbolism, or does that come to you later? Are you adding in things? And a sort of a sidebar question is, in terms of the senses that you use, are you thinking about those as you're crafting as well? Does one particular sense come to you more than others?
With symbolism, it's not something I think about. It's one of those intuitive things. However, I think that in revision is where I have power to either turn something.
So you're looking for that?
Yes.
In revision. Okay.
Yes. Because usually on my first draft, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of following the magic and the mystery somewhere. And then when I get to an ending, a satisfactory ending to me, when I kind of understand what I'm writing about, then I can go back and say, okay, what do I need to dial up in terms of like on the sentence level? Like what can this imagery do more of or less of? Or how can this create foreshadowing for something that's going to come before? So I was looking at the very first drafts of this story before, and I didn't have, maybe not an early draft, and the weevils weren't up front. They were somewhere else in the story. But going back, I assume one of the thoughts I had was, if I bring this kind of small violence up front, when the bigger violences are happening, you are already primed for it. The other question was about senses. Unfortunately, sight is the one that, it comes like so easily. But I really do, like Lagos is a place that just has so many smells.
The smells come in later in the story. Like sort of.
Especially with the animalistic tenor of the story, I think smell works for it. I don't know how deliberate that was. It's easy to say this in hindsight.
Right.
But, I think when I think of just like the ripeness of like a sweaty animal, it makes sense that would take precedence in a story like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, can you tell us, because there are a lot of writers who listen to this podcast, sort of your writing path from, I did hear that you were writing since you were a little girl. And then, can you take us all the way to the MFA program?
Sure. When I was a child.
Yes.
A lot of the early stories I was writing when I was really young, I had a novel, or I thought I had a novel when I was 10. It was basically a ripoff of Enid Blyton, like the British author who wrote like those mysteries.
I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. What's the name?
Enid Blyton. She's famous in the UK, and like Nigeria was colonized by the British, and so she's famous in Nigeria too.
Okay.
And so a lot of stories I was writing when I was a child were basically rip-offs. They weren't, people who looked like me. I was, my characters were drinking tea and eating biscuits.
Right.
I do think that perhaps I kept on, I started writing because I wanted the stories to like keep on going. We don't have like many libraries, unfortunately, back home, or bookstores. And my family wasn't, super wealthy. And so I didn't have like so many books around me. And so I fell into my own world to kind of keep the story going. When I was in high school, I would write little short stories to entertain my classmates. And if there was somebody I didn't like, I would give them like a bad job in the story. And we would, pass the stories around during boring math classes. And then when I got to university, I would write like these really short fictional flash fiction things on Facebook. And then somebody reached out to me. He had a blog, and he asked me to come on board and kind of write short stories with him. And I said yes to that. And then another website that was relatively popular, like amongst Nigerian youth, gave me a fiction column. And so I had to write one flash fiction story every Tuesday.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I know.
That's amazing.
I think it did something to my brain, because it was the kind of website that prioritized engagement. And so people were reacting to the stories as if they were real people. And I think that's when my Nigerian readership began, because of these Tuesday stories. I used to work in architecture, so I had a different job. I didn't consider it. I just thought it was something I would always do. And so I was writing and doing architecture, but then I won a prize. And then part of that prize was to go to South Africa for a residency. And while I was there, somebody told me about an MFA. She said, "Do you know that there are places that could pay you to read and write for 2 to 3 years?" And that just sounded just impossible to me.
Yeah.
But it was real.
So, and you went to Michigan. That's where I am now. I'm in Michigan.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you in Ann Arbor?
No, I'm in Detroit. But
okay.
Close.
Not so far.
Who were so you had some good mentors along the way then. Are there there are many short story writers there who you probably worked with.
Peter Hore Davis is my favorite.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's been on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from him. Yes.
Yeah. He's amazing. That did remind me that I did want to ask about the father. What did you think his role was in the story before we wrap up?
What do I think his role was?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was like kind of a bystander. Well, see, that's the fun of having you here. But he seemed to me like a bystander, and he didn't have a large role psychically in the story.
It's true. And it's true. And that's interesting. I don't have an answer.
Okay. It's more, between.
Yes. I think that he understands his wife in a way that perhaps the daughter doesn't, but then she doesn't have access to that information and he's not giving it. And so it's,
Right. Well, we're getting a lot of comments about how everyone loved the story and that it was brilliant. Yes, just a lot of praise. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you were thinking she's going to ask me about this?
The dog I knew was going to come up.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've covered that.
Yes.
I do feel bad.
And she's not going to have any friends. The friends are gone forever now.
Friends are gone.
She's going to have a very lonely life. Well, this is the first story in the collection, right? So you guys have to read the rest of the collection because it is amazing. And when does your novel come out, Pemi?
May 5.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was amazing.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. All right. Bye, you guys.